The woman pressed the folded note into my palm beside the casket, between the lily spray and the laminated prayer card, and her hand was cold even through the black silk glove she was wearing. Nobody saw it happen. Not my sister Renee, who was 3 feet away rearranging the funeral flowers for the second time that hour. Not her husband Curtis, who was leaning against the wall pretending to mourn while he checked the Steelers' score on his phone. Not Father Donnelly from St. Mark's, who was greeting mourners at the door with the practiced softness of a man who had stood beside 1,000 coffins. The whole funeral parlor smelled like carnations and lemon floor polish, and the thin, powdery perfume that older women wear when they have nowhere else in the world to be. And in the middle of all that quiet shuffling, a woman I had never seen before in my 47 years of life walked up to my mother's casket, slipped her bare hand into mine, and pressed a folded square of yellow legal paper into my palm with fingers that were shaking. I had $2.38 in my wallet. Fired 8 months ago. Wife gone 14 months. Kids living in Tucson with a man named Brad who sold commercial real estate and drove a leased BMW. House taken by Citizens Bank in March. Truck repossessed in July. I was 47 years old and standing at my mother's funeral in a borrowed black suit 2 sizes too big, in shoes I had bought for $9 at the Salvation Army on Liberty Avenue, and a stranger had just slipped me a folded note that felt like it weighed 5 pounds in my hand. She leaned in close. Her eyes were wet. Whether it was for my mother or for me or for something else entirely, I could not tell. "Don't read this here," she whispered. Her voice was low, below the murmur of the receiving line, below the soft hymnal music coming out of the ceiling speakers, below the sound of Renee correcting Curtis about the placement of the program stack on the entry table. "Don't tell your sister. Don't tell anyone." "Who are? You have 24 hours, Daniel. 24 hours. Do you understand me?" She squeezed my hand once. Hard. Then she stepped back from the casket, made the sign of the cross over my mother's folded hands, and walked toward the side exit of the Mulroney Funeral Home on Cedar Street in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, on a gray Tuesday morning in November of 2024. I stood there with my mother's body 2 feet to my left and a stranger's note burning in my closed fist, and I could feel the blood draining out of my face the way it does when you stand up too fast. I had never seen that woman before. I was certain of it. She had been in her 70s, maybe early 80s. Silver hair pulled back tight against her scalp. A black wool coat that looked like it had been pressed that morning. Pearl earrings the size of pencil erasers. The kind of woman who had money but did not advertise it. The kind of woman who did not belong in a funeral parlor in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, slipping notes to a broke 47-year-old man in a borrowed suit. But she had known my name. She had said Daniel the way you say a name you have been saying your whole life. I slipped the folded paper into the inside pocket of the suit jacket and tried to make my face look like the face of a man who was burying his mother. I tried to look like grief. I tried to look like nothing else was happening in the world. Renee glanced over at me from across the room, and I saw her eyes narrow the way they did when she was sizing me up for some new failure she was about to log in the running ledger she had been keeping on me since we were children. I held her gaze for a beat. She looked away first, which almost never happened. Then Curtis appeared at my elbow, smelling like Dracar Noir and stale gas station coffee, and clapped his hand down on my shoulder hard enough to leave a bruise through the cheap jacket. "Hanging in there, Danny boy?" I did not answer him. I was thinking about the woman. I was thinking about her hand on mine. I was thinking about 24 hours. And I was thinking about the fact that whoever she was, she had known about my mother before I had. The receiving line went on for another 40 minutes. People I had not seen in 20 years came up and shook my hand and told me my mother was a wonderful woman, and I nodded and said thank you, and the entire time my left hand was pressed flat against the inside pocket of that borrowed jacket, feeling the small rectangle of folded paper against my ribs like a second heartbeat. Renee handled the speaking. Renee always handled the speaking. My sister was 51 years old, a senior compliance officer at PNC Bank in downtown Pittsburgh, and she had been running the family since our father died in 2009. She gave the eulogy. She thanked the priest. She thanked the funeral director. She thanked the parishioners who had brought casseroles to the wake the night before. She did not thank me because in Renee's accounting of the family ledger, I had not contributed anything worth thanking. That was not entirely false. I had not been able to pay for any of it. The casket, the plot at St. Mark's Cemetery, the flowers, the program printing, the catered lunch back at Renee's house in Murraysville afterward. All of it had come out of Renee's checkbook. She had reminded me of this 3 times in the last 6 days, the most recent reminder coming that morning when I asked if I could ride to the funeral home in her car because my truck was gone. "Curtis will drop you," she had said. "I have to be there early." So Curtis had dropped me. In his black Cadillac Escalade with the heated seats and the satellite radio playing classic rock at a volume that made my teeth hurt. He had spent the entire 15-minute drive talking about a condo he and Renee were buying in Hilton Head, and how the closing was scheduled for the 2nd week of December, and how it was a shame Mom had not lived long enough to see it because she would have loved the ocean view. My mother had never been to South Carolina in her life. My mother had loved Greensburg, Pennsylvania, and her vegetable garden, and the cardinals that came to the feeder outside her kitchen window. But I had not said any of that to Curtis. I had just looked out the passenger window at the wet November streets and tried not to think about how cold it was going to be that night in the storage unit on Route 30 where I had been sleeping for the last 6 weeks. The funeral service itself was a blur. I sat in the front pew next to Renee. Curtis sat on her other side. Behind us were aunts and uncles and cousins, and a few of my mother's friends from the church bingo group, and a row of women from her old job at the credit union where she had worked for 31 years, until she retired in 2018. Father Donnelly spoke about a faithful servant and a loving mother and a woman who never raised her voice in anger. I do not remember if I cried. I remember staring at the closed casket and thinking that whoever was inside it was not my mother anymore, because my mother had been a small, warm voice on the other end of a phone line every Sunday afternoon, and that voice had been gone for 6 days now, and a wooden box could not contain what was already gone. At the burial, the wind off the cemetery hill was sharp enough to cut through the borrowed suit. I stood next to the grave and watched them lower my mother into the November ground, and I felt the folded note shift slightly in my inside pocket when I bent my head for the final prayer. I scanned the crowd at the graveside. The woman was not there. She had come to the viewing, slipped me the note, and disappeared. No one mentioned her. No one had asked who she was. As far as I could tell, no one but me had even seen her. After the burial, the family caravan moved to Renee's house in Murraysville. I rode with my cousin Mike because Curtis had filled the Escalade with my mother's church friends. Mike drove a 2007 Chevy Malibu with a cracked windshield and a check engine light that had been on since 2019. We did not talk much on the drive. Mike was the only person in the family who knew exactly how broke I was, and he had the decency not to mention it. I needed to get somewhere private. I needed to read that note, but first I had to get through the lunch. Renee's house in Murraysville was the kind of house that announces what its owners want you to think about them before you finish walking up the driveway. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, a finished basement with a wet bar Curtis had installed himself, a back deck with a built-in gas grill, and a 2-car garage with an epoxy-coated floor that Renee made you take your shoes off before walking on. I had been to that house maybe a dozen times in the 8 years they had lived there. Renee did not invite me often, and when she did, the invitations came with conditions. Don't drink too much. Don't bring anyone. Don't talk about your situation in front of the neighbors. The catered lunch was in the dining room, trays of cold cuts and rolls and macaroni salad and a fruit platter with a cantaloupe cut into stars. There was a coffee urn on the sideboard and a bottle of red wine that Curtis had opened with great ceremony, holding it up to read the label out loud so everyone could hear it was a Camus. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and stood in the corner of the dining room with my back against the wall, and I waited for an opening to slip away. The note was still in my inside pocket. I had not touched it since the burial. I had been afraid that if I touched it too often, someone would notice and someone would ask, and the woman had told me not to tell anyone, and for reasons I could not explain, I was going to obey a stranger in pearl earrings who had vanished out of a funeral parlor side door. "Daniel!" Renee was standing in front of me. She had taken off her black blazer and was holding a glass of the Camus by the stem. "Yeah, we need to talk, not now, tomorrow. Come by the house at 10. "About what?" She gave me the look she had been giving me since we were children, the look that said you already know about what and you are wasting my time by pretending you do not. "About Mom's estate, there are some papers. Curtis and I have already started the process, but you have to sign a few things. It is mostly a formality." "What process?" Daniel, please, not today, tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Curtis will make coffee. She walked away before I could ask anything else. I watched her cross the dining room and refill her wine and lean down to laugh at something one of my aunts had said, and I felt something cold slide down the back of my neck that had nothing to do with the November weather outside. Curtis caught my eye from across the room and lifted his glass in a small salute. He was smiling. He should not have been smiling at his mother-in-law's funeral lunch, but he was. I excused myself 10 minutes later and walked down the hall to the half bathroom near the front door. I locked the door behind me. I turned on the faucet so the water would cover any sound. I sat down on the closed lid of the toilet and pulled the folded yellow paper out of my inside pocket with hands that were not quite steady. It was a single sheet of legal pad paper, folded twice, the edges torn along the perforation. I unfolded it on my knee. The handwriting was old-fashioned cursive, the kind they used to teach in Catholic schools in the 1950s. Black ink, steady letters. Slightly slanted to the right, Daniel. If you are reading this, I am sorry I could not say more at the parlor. Your mother was my friend. She trusted me with something 39 years ago, and I have kept that trust until today. There are things about your father you were never told. There are things about yourself you were never told. Do not sign anything your sister puts in front of you tomorrow. Do not agree to anything. The estate is not what she thinks it is, and you are not who she thinks you are. Meet me tomorrow morning at 8 at the Iron Skillet Diner on Route 119 in Latrobe. I will be in the back booth. Come alone. You have 24 hours before the deed transfer goes through. After that, I cannot help you. Margaret Halloran. I read it 3 times. I did not know any Margaret Halloran. My mother had never mentioned a Margaret Halloran in 47 years. I folded the paper. I put it back in my pocket. I unlocked the bathroom door. I made it through another hour at Renee's house. I ate a turkey sandwich I did not taste. I shook hands with people whose names I had forgotten and whose faces I would not have recognized on the street. I told my mother's bingo friends that, yes, she had gone peacefully, even though the truth was that she had died alone in a hospital bed at Excella Health Westmoreland at 4 in the morning while I was asleep in a storage unit 12 miles away with my phone on silent because I could not afford to keep it charged through the night. That was the part I could not shake. That was the part that sat in my chest like a stone. My mother had died alone. Renee had been at a compliance conference in Cleveland. Curtis had been at home, and I had been unreachable because my phone had been dead since the night before, and the outlet in the storage unit office only worked between 9 in the morning and 6 at night. I had walked to the hospital at 7 the next morning to bring her the McDonald's coffee she liked, and a nurse named Wendy had stopped me in the hallway and put her hand on my arm and told me my mother had passed 3 hours earlier. I had not cried in the hospital. I had not cried at the wake. I had not cried at the funeral. I was not sure I remembered how anymore. At 2:30, I told Renee I was leaving. She nodded without looking at me and said Curtis would drive me. Curtis was on the back deck with my Uncle Ray, smoking a cigar and laughing about something, and I told Renee I would just walk. It was 4 miles to the storage unit. I had walked further in worse weather. "Suit yourself," she said. "Tomorrow, 10, don't be late." I left out the side door without saying goodbye to anyone else. The walk took 2 hours because I stopped at the Sheets on Route 22 to use the bathroom, and to stand inside where it was warm for as long as I could without anyone asking me to leave. I bought a small coffee with 87 cents of my $2.38, and I sat at one of the orange plastic tables in the corner and read Margaret Halloran's note for the 4th and 5th and 6th time. There are things about your father you were never told. My father had been a tool and die maker at Sony Electronics in Mount Pleasant for 34 years. He had played softball on Wednesday nights. He had voted Republican and watched the news at 6 and fallen asleep in his recliner most evenings with a can of Iron City balanced on the armrest. He had died of a heart attack in November of 2009 at the age of 63 in the parking lot of the VFW, loading a case of beer into his truck. I had been 32 years old when he died. I had thought I knew everything there was to know about Edward Patrick Sullivan. Apparently I had not. There are things about yourself you were never told. I did not know what to do with that sentence. I read it and read it and read it, and the longer I looked at it, the less it meant. I was Daniel Sullivan. I had been born at Westmoreland Hospital on April 14, 1977. I had grown up on Whitethorn Street in Greensburg. I had gone to Greensburg-Salem High School. I had married a woman named Lisa Petrucci in 2002 and divorced her in 2023. I had 2 kids, Ethan and Brooke, ages 15 and 12. I had worked at the Sony plant after my father for 19 years, until the plant closed in 2010. And then I had bounced between warehouse jobs and construction work, and a 4-year stretch driving a delivery truck for a beverage distributor in Latrobe before that company went under in 2022. I had been laid off 3 times in 2 years. My credit score was 491. My life was a matter of public record and federal tax filings, and there was nothing in it that anyone could call hidden. The estate is not what she thinks it is. I drank the last of the coffee. It had gone cold. I folded the note. I put it back in my pocket. I walked the rest of the way to the storage unit in the dark, and I did not sleep that night. The Iron Skillet Diner sits on the southbound side of Route 119, about a mile and a half north of downtown Latrobe, in a low brick building with a hand-painted sign and a gravel parking lot that has been the same gravel parking lot since 1968. I had eaten there maybe 20 times in my life, mostly with my father, mostly on Saturday mornings when I was a kid, and he would take me along on errands to give my mother a break. I had not been inside the place in 15 years. I walked the 4 miles from the storage unit. I left at 5:30 in the morning to give myself plenty of time. It was 26 degrees and a fine cold drizzle was falling, and by the time I pushed open the glass door of the diner at 7:48, my borrowed black suit was damp at the shoulders, and my Salvation Army shoes were soaked through to my socks. The diner smelled like bacon grease and burned coffee and the kind of pancake syrup that comes in gallon jugs from a restaurant supply company. There were maybe 9 people inside, 2 truckers at the counter, a young couple in a booth near the front, arguing quietly, 3 older men in matching Carhartt jackets at a foretop by the window, drinking coffee and not talking, a waitress in a green apron refilling sugar dispensers. Margaret Halloran was in the back booth, exactly where she had said she would be. She was wearing the same black wool coat, the same pearl earrings. Her silver hair was pulled back in the same tight bun. There was a cup of coffee in front of her and a slice of dry wheat toast on a small white plate. She was reading a paperback book. I could not make out the title. She looked up the moment I crossed the threshold, as if she had been listening for the bell on the door, and she lifted one gloved hand a few inches off the table in a small gesture that meant, "Come here, sit down, do not waste time." I slid into the booth across from her. The vinyl was cracked. My back was to the rest of the diner. "Mr. Sullivan," she said. Daniel, thank you for coming." Her voice was quiet, but it carried no tremor. The shaking had been at the funeral. The shaking was gone now. "I imagine you did not sleep last night." "No, ma'am." The waitress appeared. Margaret ordered me a coffee and a short stack with 2 eggs over easy without asking me what I wanted. When the waitress walked away, Margaret folded her hands on the table and looked at me for a long moment. She had pale blue eyes. They did not blink often. "Your mother and I worked together at the credit union for 26 years, she said. "I retired in 2016. She retired 2 years after. We had lunch every Thursday at the Olive Garden on Route 30 for almost a decade. She talked about you constantly. She was very proud of you, Daniel. I want you to know that before we go any further. She was very proud." I did not trust my voice, so I just nodded. "She also told me things she never told your sister. She told me things she never told your father. She told me things near the end that she had been carrying for 39 years. And 6 months ago, when she got her diagnosis, she asked me to do something for her. She asked me to wait until she was gone, and then to find you, and then to give you what I am about to give you." She reached down beside her on the booth seat and lifted something onto the table. It was a brown leather portfolio, worn at the corners, the kind of thing a lawyer might have carried in 1985. There was a small brass clasp on the front, tarnished with age. She slid it across the table toward me. "Do not open this here," she said. "Take it back to wherever you are staying, read every page, read them twice, and then you call the phone number on the inside of the front cover. The man who answers will be expecting your call." "Who is he?" "He is the attorney who has been holding your father's actual will since 1986. I felt the blood leave my face. "My father died in 2009. "Yes," Margaret said. "He did. But the will I am talking about was written long before that, and the man named in it is not your father." I sat in that booth and looked at Margaret Halloran across the table, and the diner around me went quiet in the particular way that places go quiet when your own pulse gets so loud in your ears that nothing else can compete with it. The waitress had set down my coffee and pancakes at some point. I did not remember when. The steam was still coming off the eggs. "Say that again," I said. "The man named in the will is not your father. Not Edward Sullivan, a different man. Who? She shook her head once, slowly. That is not for me to tell you. The attorney will tell you. There are legal reasons I cannot be the one to put that name in your head. I have already done more than I was supposed to do by giving you the portfolio. I gave you the portfolio because your mother begged me to, and because your sister is moving very fast, and because I could not stand the thought of you signing away something you do not even know you have. Renee, your sister has been in contact with a probate attorney in Pittsburgh since September, 2 months before your mother died. She has paperwork drafted that names her as the sole administrator of the estate, and that includes a quitclaim deed transferring your mother's house on Whitethorn Street into a trust she controls. She's going to put that paperwork in front of you at 10 o'clock this morning, and she is going to tell you it is a formality. It is not a formality. If you sign it, you forfeit everything. There is nothing to forfeit. My mother had a small house and a checking account. Renee paid for the funeral. There is no estate. Margaret looked at me with something that was not quite pity, but was close to it. Daniel, you do not know what your mother had. Your mother did not want you to know what she had until she was gone because she was afraid of what your father would do if he found out, and after your father died, she was afraid of what your sister would do if she found out. Your mother spent 39 years protecting a secret. The secret is in that portfolio. Read it. Call the attorney. Do not be late for your sister's meeting, but do not sign anything either. Sit there. Drink her coffee. Tell her you need a week to review the documents with your own counsel. She will be furious. She will pressure you. She may threaten you. Do not sign. I do not have a lawyer. You will by this afternoon. The attorney whose number is in that portfolio has been retained for 39 years on a paid retainer. His name is Howard Bregman. His office is in Pittsburgh. He has been waiting for your call since 1986. I looked at the portfolio on the table. It looked like nothing. A worn brown leather folder with a tarnished clasp. The kind of thing you might pick up at an estate sale for $3. Why did she wait? I said. Wait for what? Why did she wait until she was dead to tell me? Why not when I lost the house? Why not when Lisa left? Why not when I was working 2 warehouse jobs and still falling behind on child support? Why not any time in the last 15 years when knowing this would have changed everything? Margaret was quiet for a long time. She took a sip of her coffee. She set the cup down carefully on the saucer. Because she was afraid of your father while he was alive, she said. And because she was afraid of your sister after he died. And because she believed, rightly or wrongly, that the moment you knew, your sister would find a way to take it from you. So she made a plan. The plan was that you would not find out until after she was gone, and that you would find out through me, and that you would find out at the exact moment when your sister was about to make her move, so that you could stop it. Your mother loved you very much, Daniel, but she was not a brave woman in the way your grandfather was brave or your father was brave. She was brave in a quieter way. She was patient. She waited 39 years to give you what was yours. Do not waste the gift by signing it away at 10 o'clock this morning. I reached across the table and pulled the portfolio toward me. It was heavier than I expected. I did not open the portfolio in the diner. I paid for Margaret's coffee and toast with a $20 bill she pushed across the table to me when the check came because I did not have $20 and I did not have the pride left to refuse it. She told me to keep the change. She told me to be careful. She told me that she had done what she had promised my mother she would do, and that from this point forward the matter was between me and Howard Bregman and the truth. Then she stood up, buttoned her wool coat, and walked out of the Iron Skillet diner the same way she had walked out of the funeral parlor, quietly, without looking back. I sat in the booth for another 10 minutes with the portfolio on my lap under the table where no one could see it. I drank my coffee. I ate half of the pancakes. I left the rest because my stomach had closed up like a fist. Then I walked out into the parking lot, and I walked the half-mile down Route 119 to the public library branch on Spring Street, which opened at 9. And I sat on the cold concrete bench outside the front door with the portfolio pressed flat against my chest under my jacket until the librarian unlocked the doors at 10 minutes after the hour. I went to the back corner of the reference room, the carrel by the window that faces the parking lot, and I sat down with the portfolio on the desk in front of me, and I unfastened the brass clasp with fingers that were not steady. Inside were 3 things. A stack of papers, maybe 60 pages, held together with 2 large black binder clips. The top page was a photocopy of a birth certificate, my birth certificate, Daniel Edward Sullivan, born April 14, 1977. Westmoreland Hospital, mother Catherine Marie Sullivan, maiden name Halloran, Father Edward Patrick Sullivan. I stared at the maiden name for a long time. Halloran. My mother's maiden name was Halloran. Margaret Halloran was not my mother's friend from the credit union, or she was, but she was also something else. She was something my mother had never mentioned in 47 years of Sunday phone calls. She was family. She had to be. The second thing in the portfolio was a sealed white business envelope. My name was written on the front in my mother's handwriting. Just Daniel. No address, no date. The flap was sealed with a strip of yellowed Scotch tape that had been pressed down so many years ago that the adhesive had turned brown around the edges. The third thing was a smaller envelope, manila, with a phone number written on the outside in black ink. Underneath the phone number, in the same handwriting from Margaret's note, was a name. Howard Bregman, Esquire. Bregman and Associates, Pittsburgh. The envelope itself was thin. Whatever was inside, it was a single sheet of paper, maybe two. I went for my mother's letter first, the white envelope with my name on it. I peeled back the tape carefully. The flap came up without tearing. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, pale blue, with a small flower printed in the upper left corner. My mother had used this stationery for 30 years. I had received birthday cards on it. I had received notes in lunchboxes on it when I was a child. I would have known it in the dark. The letter was dated September 18, 2024. 6 weeks before she died. Danny, if Margaret has done what I asked, you are reading this somewhere quiet, alone, and you are scared. I am sorry for that. I have been sorry for 47 years. I'm going to tell you something now that I should have told you decades ago, and the only excuse I have is that I was a coward, and I was afraid, and every year that went by made it harder to find the words. Edward Sullivan was not your father. I loved him. He loved you. He raised you as his own from the day you were born, and he never once treated you as anything less than his son. But he was not the man who made you. The man who made you was someone I knew before I met Edward. Someone I was not allowed to marry, someone whose family would not have accepted a girl like me. Someone who died in a car accident on the Pennsylvania Turnpike in November of 1976 when I was 4 months pregnant with you. His name was Thomas Whitfield Ashcroft. I read the name 3 times. Thomas Whitfield Ashcroft. The letters did not arrange themselves into anything that meant anything to me. It was a name from somewhere else. A name that belonged on a brass plate in a building I had never been inside. I kept reading. Thomas was the only son of Whitfield Ashcroft of Sewickley Heights. The Ashcroft family owned a holding company called Ashcroft Industrial, which owned 3 steel fabrication plants in western Pennsylvania, 2 coal interests in West Virginia, and a real estate portfolio that I do not pretend to understand. Thomas was 26 years old when he died. He had just finished his MBA at Carnegie Mellon. He was being groomed to take over his father's company. He and I had met at a Christmas party at the credit union in 1975 when his father's company was a client. We dated in secret for 10 months. His family did not know about me. My family did not know about him. We were planning to tell everyone in December of 1976. He never made it to December. When Thomas died, his father refused to acknowledge that we had been together. He refused to acknowledge that I was pregnant. He had his attorney send me a letter telling me that any claim I made against the family would be contested in court and destroyed in the newspapers, and that I should disappear quietly and never contact anyone in the Ashcroft family again. I was 24 years old, Danny. I was scared. I did what he asked. 6 weeks later, I met Edward Sullivan at a church social. He knew I was pregnant. He did not care. He married me in February of 1977, 2 months before you were born. He put his name on your birth certificate. He raised you as his own. He was a good man, Danny. He never stopped being a good man. Please do not think less of him because of any of this. He chose you. Every day for 32 years, he chose you. But Thomas's father, Whitfield Ashcroft, died in 1986. And before he died, something happened that I did not expect. His lawyer contacted me. The lawyer told me that on his deathbed, Whitfield had instructed his estate to set aside a portion of the family trust for the child his son had left behind. He had known about you the entire time. He had hired an investigator in 1977. He had photographs of you as a baby. He had photographs of you on your first day of kindergarten. He had photographs of you all the way through high school. He had watched you grow up from a distance, and he had decided at the end of his life that he could not take what he knew with him into the ground. The portion of the trust was held in escrow under your name. I was told it could not be touched until after my death by the terms Whitfield set in his will. I was told the existence of the trust was to be kept confidential until that time. I was told the attorney managing the trust would contact you when the time came. Danny, I never told your father. I never told Renee. I never told you. I made a choice in 1986 that I have spent the rest of my life questioning. I was afraid of what your father would do if he found out you were not his by blood. I was afraid of what Renee would do if she found out you had something she did not. I was afraid of losing the family I had built, so I kept the secret. And I let you grow up not knowing. I know what the last 15 years have done to you. I know about Lisa. I know about the house. I know about the storage unit, Danny, even though you have never told me. A mother knows. I have prayed every night for the strength to tell you while I was still here to hold your hand through it. I did not have that strength. I am sorry. Call Howard Bregman. He will explain everything. The trust has grown considerably since 1986. Do not let Renee anywhere near it. She does not know it exists. If she finds out before the transfer is complete, she will find a way to challenge it. Howard will tell you how to protect yourself. I love you. I have always loved you. Edward loved you. Thomas loved you in the few months he knew you existed. You have been loved by 3 different men in 3 different ways your entire life. Mom, I do not remember leaving the library. I remember the librarian glancing at me over her reading glasses as I walked past the front desk with the portfolio clutched against my chest. I remember the cold air hitting my face on Spring Street. I remember standing on the corner of Spring and Ligonier for what might have been 5 minutes or might have been 20, watching the traffic go by, and not being able to feel my hands inside my coat pockets. I called Howard Bregman at 9:47 from a pay phone outside the Sunoco station on Route 30. I used 3 of the quarters Margaret had pushed across the table with my change at the diner. A woman answered on the second ring. I told her my name. There was a pause of maybe 2 seconds, and then she put me through without another word. Howard Bregman's voice was slow and deep and did not waste a syllable. Daniel, I have been waiting for this call for a long time. Where are you right now? A pay phone in Greensburg. Are you alone? Yes, your sister has a meeting scheduled with you at 10 o'clock. Yes. Go to that meeting. Do not sign anything. Tell her you need a week to review the documents with your own attorney. Give her my name and my office number when she asks. She will ask. When she does, write the information down on a piece of paper and slide it across the table to her. Do not give her the satisfaction of speaking it out loud. Then you stand up, you leave her house, and you take a taxi to the bus station. There is an 11:45 Greyhound to Pittsburgh. I have already paid for your ticket. It is being held under your name at the counter. When you arrive at the Pittsburgh station, my associate will be waiting. Her name is Anita Reyes. She will be holding a sign. She will bring you to my office. We will spend the rest of the day going through the trust documents. Are you following me? Yes. Daniel, one more thing. The current valuation of the trust as of the close of business on Friday was $47,200,000. I want you to hear that number before you walk into your sister's house so that nothing she says inside that house can shake you. $47,200,000. That number is yours. It has been yours since 1986. Walk into the meeting. Be polite. Be calm. Do not sign. I will see you at 3 o'clock. He hung up. I stood at the pay phone with the receiver still in my hand for a long time. I had eaten dumpster pizza in September. I had donated plasma at the clinic on McKee Place twice a week for the last 4 months to keep my phone turned on. I had slept on a folded moving blanket on the concrete floor of a 10x15 storage unit for 43 nights. I had not bought a new piece of clothing for myself in 2.5 years. I had been told by a judge in family court in February that I was $3,400 behind in child support. I had been told by a Citizens Bank loan officer in March that I would never qualify for a mortgage again in my lifetime. $47,200,000. I hung up the receiver. I walked the 2 miles to Renee's house in Murraysville. I arrived at 10 o'clock exactly. Curtis answered the door. He was wearing a polo shirt and khakis. He had a coffee mug in his hand. He looked at my wet shoes and my borrowed suit and the brown leather portfolio under my arm, and his smile flickered for just a second. "Danny boy, come in. Renee is in the dining room." She was at the head of the table, 3 folders in front of her. A pen laid out next to each one. A second pen at the place setting across from her. She did not stand up when I came in. She gestured to the chair. "Sit down. Curtis will get you coffee." I sat down. I set the portfolio on the floor beside my chair where she could not see it. I folded my hands on the table. "Daniel," she said, opening the first folder. "These are pretty straightforward. The quitclaim, the administrator designation, and the trust paperwork. Sign each one where the blue tab is." I looked at her across the table. I need a week, I said. Renee's face did not change for a full 3 seconds. Then her jaw set and the muscle in the side of her neck moved the way it had been moving since we were children whenever I had said something she had not authorized me to say. Excuse me. I need a week to have these reviewed by my own attorney. Your own attorney. She laughed once, sharp, with no humor in it. Daniel, you do not have an attorney, you do not have a checking account, you do not have a vehicle, you do not have a residence. What you have is 2 days of stubble and a borrowed suit, and a sister who is trying to handle mom's affairs the right way so that none of this falls apart while you sort out whatever is going on with you. Sign the papers. I took the small piece of notepad paper I had written on outside the Sunoco station. I slid it across the table. Howard Bregman, Bregman and Associates, the Pittsburgh phone number. She picked it up. She read it. She read it again. The color left her face the way blood leaves a face when someone has just understood something they were not expecting to understand. Where did you get this name? I will see you in a week, Renee. I stood up. I picked up the portfolio. I walked out of her dining room and past Curtis in the hallway and out the front door, and I did not look back. I heard her say my name once behind me. I heard her say it a second time, louder. I kept walking. A taxi took me to the Greyhound station. The ticket was waiting under my name, exactly as Howard had said it would be. I rode the 11:45 into Pittsburgh with the portfolio on my lap and my forehead against the cold window glass, and I watched the November fields go past, and I did not sleep, and I did not cry, and I did not think about anything except my mother's handwriting on pale blue stationery. Anita Reyes was waiting at the Pittsburgh station with a small white sign that had my name printed on it in black marker. She drove me to a building on Grant Street with a brass plate beside the door that I did not look at too closely because my hands were shaking again, and I did not trust myself to read small print. Howard Bregman was 68 years old, gray at the temples, a quiet man with a quiet office. He shook my hand. He poured me a glass of water. He sat me down at a conference table, and for the next 4 hours he walked me through every document, every disbursement schedule, every clause of the trust my grandfather had built for me in 1986. He also told me near the end of the afternoon that the Ashcroft family had a second son, Thomas's younger brother, a man named Spencer Ashcroft, 61 years old, who lived in Sewickley Heights and who served on the board of Ashcroft Industrial. Spencer had known about me my entire life. Spencer had been the one who renewed Howard's retainer every year for 39 years. Spencer had asked Howard to deliver one message when the time came. He wants to meet you, Howard said. Whenever you are ready, there is no pressure. He is your uncle, Daniel. He has been waiting almost 40 years to shake your hand. I did not answer right away. I sat there in that conference room on Grant Street, and I thought about the man in the parking lot of the VFW in November of 2009. The man who had raised me, the man who had taught me to drive a stick shift and how to hold a hammer and how to look another man in the eye when you shook his hand. Edward Patrick Sullivan, the man whose name was on my birth certificate, the man who had chosen me when he did not have to. Tell him I would like that, I said, but not yet. I need a few weeks. Howard nodded. That was 8 months ago. I bought back my mother's house on Whitethorn Street in February, cash. I had the kitchen cabinets refinished and I planted tomatoes in her garden in May. Ethan and Brooke spend every other weekend with me now. Lisa and I are civil. Renee and I are not, but Curtis sent me a Christmas card I did not open. Margaret Halloran comes for Sunday dinner once a month. She is my great-aunt. I did not know I had one. I have met Spencer Ashcroft 3 times now. He's a quiet man with my mother's eyes, which is a sentence that does not make sense until you understand that grief rearranges everything you thought you knew about who you came from. I keep the brown leather portfolio in the top drawer of my father's old dresser. Both of my fathers, in their way, are still with me. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever been handed a piece of paper by a stranger and felt the whole shape of your life shift under your feet? Have you ever found out late that someone you loved had been carrying a secret for you instead of from you? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story reached you, hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. I will see you in the next one.